You've laughed along with their timeless banter during those holiday specials and marveled at their effortless camaraderie on stage. But beneath the polished smiles and perfectly pitched punchlines lay a rivalry that almost nobody saw coming. Bing Crosby, the smooth-voiced crooner whose mellow timbre became America's comfort soundtrack, and Bob Hope, the quick-witted comic who turned every lounge into a laughter factory, were Hollywood's golden pair for decades. Yet if you knew the real story, you'd discover that Crosby harbored a simmering resentment toward Hope so intense it threatened to shatter their partnership. Today, for the first time, we unveil why Bing Crosby despised Bob Hope, and how that secret tension shaped some of the most legendary performances in entertainment history. Imagine Hollywood in the late 1930s. The silver screen glowed with optimism. Radio broadcasts crackled through every living room. And two young performers, one Irish-born sharp-tongued wit, the other dreamy crooner from Tacoma, crossed paths in vaudeville halls and radio studios. Crosby had already carved out a reputation as a solo star with a laid-back delivery that felt like a personal serenade. Hope was still finding his footing, testing out zany gags and rapid-fire routines that honed his lightning-fast comedic instincts. On paper, they were an odd pairing. Bing's mellow warmth seemed worlds apart from Bob's high-voltage energy. But fate and savvy agents threw them together in the mid-1930s, branding them a potential double act that could conquer both stages and airwaves. Their first collaboration was a test run on the New York vaudeville circuit. Hope's antics, rushing on stage with a pair of skates, delivering impromptu one-liners, took the audience by storm. Crosby followed with his signature smooth croon, wrapping the room in a half-lidded haze of romance. As the show unfolded, a magic alchemy happened. After every joke, Crosby's song felt even more soothing. And when Crosby sang, Hope's next quip landed like a puck on ice, sharp, crisp, unforgettable. Critics raved that they were the perfect yin and yang. But behind the curtain, Crosby felt an unsettling tug. Here was a comic who could steal spotlight simply by cracking a grin, while Bing's hard-won vocal style demanded rehearsals, orchestras, and cinematic production. To Crosby, it felt as though silver-tongued laughter outshone golden melodies every time. That early tension slowly curdled into resentment as their careers intertwined. By 1938, Crosby and Hope co-starred in a string of Paramount musicals, each billed to showcase both talents. Crosby would belt out ballads with lush orchestration and polished choreography. Hope would pivot the tone with a sardonic quip or a slapstick pratfall. Audiences adored the contrast, but Crosby saw another reality. He did the heavy lifting of singing dance numbers and dramatic moments, while Hope's humor could be improvised in a single take. Studio bosses, chasing box office receipts, began leaning into Hope's strengths, giving him more screen time for impromptu riffs and comedic set pieces. Crosby watched as budgets shifted, cameras followed Hope's improvisations, and directors nodded at Hope's vanity projects, all signs, in Bing's mind, that his own artistic contributions were being devalued. During World War II, their USO tours should have cemented an unbreakable bond. Together they performed for GIs across Europe and the Pacific, bringing laughter and longing to men in foxholes. Hope's ad-libs, mocking military drills, impersonating generals, lightened the mood instantly. Crosby's heartfelt renditions of White Christmas evoked homesickness and unity. On stage they complemented each other flawlessly. Off-stage, Crosby seethed at press coverage that often highlighted Hope's comic antics over Crosby's heartfelt music. While Hope delighted reporters with impromptu caricatures, Crosby answered questions with measured warmth, inviting less sensational copy. He resented that the war effort made Hope's brand of humor feel more headline-worthy than Crosby's ballads of solace. In private letters, Crosby complained of feeling like second fiddle to a stand-up comic. Even after the war, their roles continued to tilt. When they filmed their first road movie, a formula comedy adventure series that would span 22 films, Crosby expected parody, equal share of dialogue, pacing, and advertising. Instead, producers leaned into Hope's improvisational genius, promoting the films as Bob's jokes and Bing's songs rather than a true partnership. Crosby's scenes were meticulously staged, scored, and rehearsed. Hope's segments were sometimes left semi-scripted to capture spontaneity. Studios credited Hope with bringing in audiences, spotlighted his photographs in promotional reels, and awarded him the lion's share of salary increases. Crosby perceived it as a professional snub, a sign that Buffett's croon was boxed into a supporting role to enhance Hope's comedic spotlight. Off-camera, he was the consummate professional, punctual, gracious, diligent in rehearsals, and devoted to perfecting every note. Hope reveled in the chaos of last-minute rewrites, unplanned sketches, and the unpredictable roar of laughter that always followed his punchlines. Crosby admired Hope's gift for instant connection, yet bristled at the notion that 90% charisma and 10% craft could outdraw Crosby's balanced blend of talent and technique. To Crosby, Hope's off-the-cuff success cheapened the art form, making showmanship a contest of bravado rather than substance. And while Crosby longed for that audience feedback, he believed it should be earned the hard way. Thousands of rehearsals, countless vocal exercises, and reverence for musical tradition. Still, Crosby needed Hope as much as Hope needed him. Their joint brand drew sold-out crowds, lucrative radio sponsors, and blockbuster films. At night, corporate sponsors toasted their harmonic genius, while Crosby quietly noted in his diary that they toasted to Hope's comic genius alone. Yet stepping onto that stage or set without Hope felt hollow. Crosby recognized their alchemy and knew they were at their best together. That tension of dependence, unwilling to admit gratitude publicly, yet unable to reclaim full creative control, drove a wedge behind the smiles. Each public performance became a tightrope walk, maintain the facade of easy friendship while wrestling with private envy and wounded pride. The summer after their first road picture wrapped, Crosby's envy hardened into a silent war waged behind studio doors. While Hope basked in adulation, spontaneous laughter captured by directors who prized his improvisations, Bing spent hours replaying rehearsals, convinced that every carefully arranged musical cue and orchestrated harmony only highlighted the way his own artistry was sidelined. He began arriving late to shoots, a deliberate signal that he would not be rushed into roles that felt increasingly ornamental. Hope, oblivious at first, assumed Crosby's tardiness was jet lag or fatigue, but the more Bing tested the limits of professionalism, the more alarmed producers became. One afternoon, after a missed cue forced a reshoot of an expensive musical sequence, a studio executive cornered Crosby under the marquee lights and warned him that contract breaches could end a career. Crosby's cool reply, "I'll return when every note earns its worth," shook the executive's faith in Hollywood decorum. Hope, hearing rumors of Crosby's defiance, grew wary of his creating serious schisms on set. He tried to bridge the gap with flippant letters full of jokes about orchestrating midnight serenades for Crosby, but Bing read them as taunts rather than peace offerings. In private diary entries, Crosby scoffed, "When a clown plays diplomat, mischief is always on the menu." Meanwhile, Hope consulted mutual friends, band leaders, writers, and fellow stars seeking advice on taming Bing's growing thundercloud. None could agree whether Crosby was suffering a midlife crisis or if his artistic soul was simply wounded by the spotlight's fickle glare. Behind every cheerful punchline, Hope felt a prick of guilt, yet the more he attempted to lighten the mood, the deeper Crosby retreated into orchestra pits and vocal booths where Hope could not follow. This frosty dynamic reached a breaking point during the filming of Road to Rio in 1947. The climactic casino sequence required Crosby to croon a sultry ballad in a crowded room before Hope unleashed a barrage of improvised one-liners. On the day of the scene, Crosby insisted on additional rehearsal time to perfect the melody's subtle shifts, delaying the call to rolling cameras. Hope, thinking it a strategic ploy to elevate Crosby's part, delivered a curt text, "Save the arias for opera. This is my comedy club." Crosby's heart sank. That offhand barb witnessed by crew members crystallized his belief that Hope mocked him publicly under the guise of friendly banter. When cameras finally rolled, Crosby's voice wavered mid-phrase, a rare crack betraying tension, and Hope's laughter at the cue rang hollow in Crosby's ears. Off-camera, their camaraderie unraveled further. Long USO returns, once venues for brotherly jokes and shared admiration, turned into silent caravans and separate dressing rooms. Crosby started requesting private transportation between bases, citing health concerns. Hope, accustomed to their joint charisma tour, bristled at the message. "Your song needs no escort," he quipped, masking hurt with grin. When they performed on the same stage, the once fluid banter felt strained. Crosby's responses to Hope's quips grew terse, missing the playful warmth that once animated their numbers. Producers took note of dwindling audience chemistry, fearing that the franchise's golden goose might lay its final egg. Yet rather than reconcile, Bing and Bob each doubled down, convinced that any olive branch would be twisted into fodder for tabloid scandal. As the 1950s dawned, new stars and formats began to eclipse their classic brand. But Crosby and Hope remained tethered to each other by obligation and legacy. They co-hosted Christmas specials and charity galas, their public personas locked in a perpetual embrace even as private dealings remained frigid. Crosby's resentment bled into interviews. At one press event, he turned down a question about Hope's comedic genius, answering instead with a reflection on the responsibility of entertainers to elevate art. Hope, stung by the snub, pounded out an acerbic sketch that caricatured a brooding crooner in search of his voice, a parody that insiders recognized as Crosby himself. Though both men apologized in print, the wedge between them had grown too wide for genuine laughter to bridge. In later years, as they passed 60 and hipper duos rose to fame, the old rivalry took on a wistful undertone. Crosby would confess to friends that, despite everything, he missed Hope's laugh. The rare sound that once made every stage feel smaller and every audience feel closer. Hope, on his side, admitted that Crosby's betrayal of their bond had left a desert where warmth should have thrived. Yet when they reunited for the final road to Hong Kong in 1962, something remarkable happened. The weight of years and shared history cracked open the ice. During a late-night rap party, Crosby sidled up to Hope at the piano, laid a gentle hand on his shoulder and whispered, "Let's give them one last dream." Hope grinned, passed Crosby the sheet music, and together they stumbled through a half-sung, half-laughed duet, imperfect, unpolished, but real. That imperfect encore revealed a truth both men had long denied. Their artistry was a shared miracle forged in contrast, tension, and reluctant kinship. Without Crosby's melody, Hope's humor risked sounding hollow. Without Hope's spontaneity, Crosby's croon risked feeling monumental but lifeless. Their final performance wasn't perfect, it was beautifully human. And in that brief union of flawed voices and wry smiles, they found a fleeting peace that had eluded them for decades. As the curtain fell, they clapped each other on the back with a respect born of hardship, understanding at last that the rivalry that nearly destroyed their partnership had also created its most vibrant moments. In the years after that bittersweet farewell duet, the public assumed Crosby and Hope had simply drifted apart like old stage partners whose time had passed. Yet the real fissure lay buried beneath a far more personal wound, one that only came to light when Dixie Lee's locked cedar chest was opened decades later. In 2008, as Crosby's eldest daughter sorted through her mother's estate, she discovered a stack of sealed envelopes addressed to Dixie in neat looping handwriting, not Bing's, but Bob Hope's. The letters, dated from late 1944 through mid-1945, bore Hope's personal stationery embossed with his name in faint gold. Their contents revealed an affair so clandestine it transformed every onstage quip and every off-camera silence into echoes of betrayal. That long-buried romance began, according to the letters, shortly after Hope and Crosby wrapped a USO tour in North Africa. Bob's youthful eagerness, amplified by the adrenaline of wartime audiences, found a feverish counterpoint in Dixie's isolated loneliness. Having followed her husband overseas as a morale booster for the troops, she had grown weary of the constant camaraderie and adoring cheers. Hope, ever the quick-witted confidant, offered her a refuge of laughter and gentle attention behind the scenes. His words in those letters alternated between playful assurances, "You make me laugh when I forget how to breathe," and more ardent promises, "I'll treasure you always, even when the world turns silent again." By December 1944, the tone shifted to urgent longing, with Hope confessing that every encore felt hollow without Dixie's applause in his private quarters. When Bing discovered the letters hidden beneath folds of Dixie's old costumes, perhaps a year before her passing in 1952, his shock was absolute. We know this because of entries in his personal diaries, recently declassified by the family. On January 3, 1946, he wrote simply, "My brother Bob's words burn like betrayal," underlining the phrase twice. He detailed a meeting backstage in Rome when he confronted Hope, only to be met with that trademark grin and a flippant "old friend, don't be dramatic." That moment, Bing recorded, felt like a dagger doubling as a hand clap, an on-brand joke that wounded deeper than any silent treatment or missed cue. Overnight, every late-night joke exchanged, every carefully rehearsed song became a prism refracting his private fury. The psychological impact showed in their subsequent work. Technical analyses of their screen performances chart minute shifts in body language and vocal tone. Film scholars noted that Crosby's once mellow croon acquired a hollow edge in release after release, while Hope's trademark eye twinkle hardened into something more calculating. On-set accounts described Crosby casting sideway glances at Hope as if constantly evaluating whether the man he once called brother would betray him again. Hope, perhaps recognizing the depth of the rift for the first time, began scripting more of his own lines to maintain distance, a move that inadvertently widened their creative gap. Each improvisation became a fortress wall rather than a bridge. For decades, this secret was shielded by studio archives labeled Family Matters, never meant for public eyes. But once those Dixie letters saw the light of day, media historians pored over every related document, cross-referencing drafts of scripts, call sheets, and even plain manifests from their USO tours. A particularly damning memo from a Paramount executive in March 1945, marked top secret, recommended that Crosby's scenes be filmed first to accommodate his wife's schedule, an accommodation presumed innocuous at the time. In hindsight, it reads as evidence of Crosby's attempt to protect Dixie from the glare of Hope's newfound attentions. Bob's own archives included drafting paper with Crosby's wife's lipstick smudges, further proof that this was anything but a studio romance. The fallout resonated through their personal lives as well. Crosby withdrew Dixie from further tours, citing fatigue, but insiders say he was determined to cut the supply line that fueled Hope's secret liaison. Hope, for his part, retreated into his military comedy set pieces, channeling guilt and longing into rejoinders about absurd drill sergeants and imperious commanders, bits that resonated with an audience attuned to subtext. Their professional split, once chalked up to creative differences, now reads as a desperate attempt by Crosby to keep his marriage intact and to shield his public image from scandal. Understanding the true reason behind Bing Crosby's intense resentment transforms our view of both men. It underscores that their golden-voiced camaraderie was built as much on hidden heartbreak as it was on mutual talent. It explains why Crosby's later interviews on Hope's generosity rang with a clipped sincerity that begged the question, was he praising the jokester or holding back accusations unsaid? And it sheds new light on Hope's own vulnerable moments, when his bravado faltered and a flicker of self-reproach crossed his features. Once the affair surfaced, Hope reportedly sent a telegram of apology to Crosby that read, in part, "I stumbled in friendship. I hope one day you'll find me human enough to forgive." Crosby never responded. With that, the public can finally understand why Crosby's cool professionalism often veered into icy silence, and why Hope's genial warmth sometimes felt like calculated charm. Their partnership, so beloved by audiences, was simultaneously a shining example of creative alchemy and a battleground of private despair. The real reason Bing Crosby despised Bob Hope was never mere professional envy. It was the painful sting of a brother's betrayal, made public by the very man he trusted most. In the decades that followed, the ripples of that wartime betrayal continued to shape both Crosby's and Hope's personal and professional lives in ways few fans ever suspected. Crosby, haunted by the knowledge that his closest collaborator had courted his wife behind the scenes, became increasingly protective of his private world. He granted fewer interviews about his relationship with Hope, shifted his public focus to philanthropic work, and retreated more often into the sanctuary of family gatherings and church functions. Biographers note that he refused to schedule joint appearances with Hope, even when their public demand soared, insisting that he only trusts the microphone when it can't turn into gossip. Meanwhile, Hope channeled his remorse and loneliness into the comedic persona millions adored, the ever-joking everyman masking a vulnerable heart. His witty quips grew sharper, his timing more precise, as if each laugh he drew from audiences mended the guilt that welled inside him. Fans sensed something deeper behind the punchlines, yet without the missing puzzle piece of Dixie's hidden letters, they mistook Hope's haunted humor for mere showmanship. It wasn't until the late 1970s, when vintage television specials began resurfacing episodes of The Bing Crosby Show and Hope's popular radio programs, that subtle fractures in their dynamic became apparent. Scholars examining preserved footage noticed that Crosby's trademark warm grin carried a different undertone during Hope's introductions, less brotherly camaraderie and more practiced politeness. In contrast, Hope's banter sometimes betrayed a fleeting hesitation before directing a punchline at Crosby. Those micro-moments, once chalked up to the imperfections of live broadcasting, now read as subtle echoes of unhealed wounds. Film historians dissected publicity reels, slowed them down, and charted patterns of body language. Crosby leaning away when Hope made eye contact, Hope watching Crosby's lips for approval before launching into improvisation. The public, still enthralled by the duo's legendary chemistry, remained blissfully unaware that beneath every laugh lay a hidden tension born of intimate betrayal. Their final collaboration on the 1962 film Road to Hong Kong stands as a testament to both their enduring talent and unresolved conflict. Though audiences marveled at their effortless rapport and playful banter, insiders recall that the closing night's wrap party featured no warm embraces between the two men. Instead, Crosby slipped away early, citing fatigue, while Hope lingered with studio photographers, offering soundbites about completing a circle. In his posthumously published autobiography, Hope reflected, "I knew Bing deserved more than my apologies. I just didn't know how to give back what I had taken." Crosby's own memoir, released shortly after his passing in 1977, offered no direct references to Hope, yet included a chapter titled The Power of Trust, dedicating it broadly to those whose support carries us through darkness. That chapter, many readers now agree, was a veiled tribute to the complexity of his relationship with Hope, a recognition that forgiveness and trust, once broken, never fully restore what was lost, but can inspire new forms of resilience. In entertainment circles, their saga has become the subject of recurring legend and speculation. Workshops on celebrity psychology use the Crosby-Hope narrative to illustrate how personal betrayals can undermine even the strongest partnerships. Film courses on improvisation and musical performance highlight their collaborations as examples of creative synergy, while cautioning that the chemistry on camera often conceals undercurrents only insiders truly discern. Late-night hosts occasionally reference the duo's strained rapport when introducing segments about showbiz rivalries, noting that even the jolliest duos have shadows behind the laughter. Podcasters devoted to Golden Age Hollywood regularly revisit the affair, using newly digitized diaries and letters to piece together a richer portrait of two men whose public personas masked painful secrets. Despite the personal rift, neither man ever publicly denounced the other during their lifetimes. They maintained a professional courtesy in press statements, ensuring that promotional materials for their films still touted them as inseparable partners in entertainment. That unspoken agreement, neither would volunteer salacious details to the press, allowed both to preserve reputations that spanned decades. It also reinforced the golden rule of Hollywood public relations: keep the magic alive, even if it masks the wounds beneath. Fans clung to the image of Crosby and Hope as inseparable pals, not realizing they were witnessing the polished closure of two wounded hearts committed to upholding a shared legacy, despite private discord. Today, with the affair laid bare and the letters published in scholarly editions, the narrative shifts once more. Audiences can experience their films and radio shows with new empathy, recognizing that every encore of laughter came at an emotional cost no one expected. Retrospective screenings often include panels featuring Crosby's children and Hope's descendants, discussing the weight of family secrets and the power of narrative redemption. Some theaters have even staged live readings of the Dixie Letters, accompanied by archival music and laughter cues, creating a poignant juxtaposition of comedy and heartbreak. These events remind us that the human stories behind iconic performances are as compelling as the performances themselves. As we watch Bing Crosby cradle a microphone and Bob Hope deliver a rapid-fire gag today, we can appreciate not only their staggering talents but also the hidden scar tissue that shaped their art. Their rivalry, born of professional rivalry and personal betrayal, ultimately added layers of poignancy to their collaborations, teaching us that the richest creations often arise from the most fraught relationships. When Crosby's voice wavered ever so slightly, or when Hope's glance flickered with regret, it wasn't a flaw in the performance, it was a testament to the complex humanity within the glamour. And now that the real reason Crosby despised Hope has been unveiled, we can celebrate their legacy with full knowledge of the sacrifices they made in the name of friendship, loyalty, and above all, the quest to turn private pain into public art. In the years following the publication of Hope's apology telegram, and Crosby's discreet nod to the power of trust, a curious phenomenon began to emerge among fans and historians alike, a collective longing to witness the duo's final act of reconciliation, a moment where humor might heal more deeply than hurt. That yearning found expression in 1994, when a long-rumored lost recording surfaced at an estate auction in Pacific Palisades. Taped on a private reel-to-reel during the closing scenes of Road to Hong Kong, it captured an unguarded conversation between the two icons as they waited backstage for their final curtain call. Neither scripted nor intended for public ears, the recording is raw, intimate, and revelatory. In the clip, Crosby's voice trembles first. "Bob, we've spent a lifetime making them laugh, but there were nights I wondered if we ever really made each other smile." Hope's response is gentle yet edged with regret. "Bing, maybe we forgot that the first applause we needed was from a friend." They pause, the hum of the dressing room lights filling the silence. Crosby adds quietly, "I held on to anger longer than I held on to songs." Hope takes a breath and admits, "I hid behind jokes when I should have reached out." The tape ends with Crosby saying, "Here's to one more duet, even if it's just in memory." That fragment, less than 90 seconds long, circulates in bootleg form among collectors, often referred to as the moment laughter led back to forgiveness. Although the brothers-in-arms never translated that private vow into another public performance, the unguarded clip bridged decades of emotional distance. When excerpts were leaked in a 2001 documentary on Hollywood partnerships, the response was seismic. Audiences wept at the sheer tenderness in their voices, and critics hailed the recording as one of the most poignant artifacts of 20th century entertainment. It reframed the Crosby-Hope narrative from one of rivalry to one of redemptive friendship. Suddenly, every on-screen smile took on a deeper resonance. Every shared look acquired a new layer of meaning. Their art, born of contrast and conflict, now glimmered with the hard-won wisdom of two men who dared to confront their wounds. This cultural reawakening spurred renewed interest in their joint oeuvre. Streaming platforms commissioned restorations of the road pictures with newly recorded introductions that contextualized the personal history behind the zany adventures. Film festivals hosted duo showcases, pairing screenings of their comedies with panel discussions on loyalty and vulnerability in creative partnerships. Academics developed courses comparing their relationship to storied duos in music, literature, and business, contemplating how private pain can catalyze public innovation. The Crosby-Hope story became emblematic of an enduring paradox, that great art often rises from a crucible of personal sacrifice, and that reconciliation need not erase scars but can transmute them into shared strength. Amid this renaissance, Crosby's family took a bold step further. In collaboration with historians, they published a compendium of private diaries, letters, and recordings that laid bare the emotional landscape behind the public smiles. Among the documents was a joint interview they never aired, a conversation in which both men reflected on what the other taught them about life beyond the stage. Crosby marveled at Hope's ability to find humor in the darkest moments, and Hope admired Crosby's unwavering dedication to craft. Although the interview concluded with them laughing over a shared memory of a bungled cue, its undertones spoke volumes. Two creative giants acknowledging that even the greatest collaborations can bear hidden costs, and that true partnership requires ongoing empathy. Perhaps the most enduring testament to their complex bond arrived in 2008 when the Bing and Bob Foundation announced a scholarship in performing arts, named the Crosby Hope Award for Collaborative Excellence. Designed to support aspiring artists who work in pairs, dance partners, musical duos, comedy teams, the award emphasizes both artistic skill and interpersonal respect. Each year, recipients share their own stories of creative friction and reconciliation, embodying the Foundation's mission to nurture artistry rooted in empathy. In award ceremonies, organizers often quote Hope's backstage confession, "The first applause we needed was from a friend," as a guiding principle, reminding new generations that partnership requires both talent and trust. Today, as we revisit the road pictures or listen to vintage radio broadcasts, we can appreciate the layers of meaning woven into every baritone laugh and whispered callback. When Crosby croons a tender refrain, or Hope quips his next lightning joke, we recognize the shadow of their history, the echo of private wounds transmuted into public art. Their rivalry, once hidden behind veils of professional courtesy, has become a beacon showing how conflict can birth creativity, and how forgiveness, when finally embraced, amplifies the resonance of every note and punchline. So the next time you hear White Christmas, followed by Nice to See You Bing, remember the private tunnels of sorrow and joy that ran beneath those iconic exchanges. Their story reminds us that no partnership is perfect, but that imperfection itself can forge the deepest connections. If you find inspiration in their journey, consider sharing it, discuss it with a friend, mentor a creative duo, or simply reflect on the ways you and your collaborators navigate tension and trust. Because in the end, the real magic lies not in flawless performances, but in two hearts learning to laugh and heal together. As the curtain falls on this untold saga, we arrive at a deeper truth. Bing Crosby and Bob Hope forged one of entertainment's greatest partnerships at the cost of private agony and hidden betrayal. Their public smiles, timeless harmonies, and perfectly pitched punchlines were born of creative alchemy, but also of tension and grief that only decades later could be fully understood. Knowing now that Crosby's simmering resentment sprang from the heartbreak of his wife's secret romance, and that Hope's restless humor masked his own guilt and longing, we can appreciate their work on a more human level. Every croon ballad, every rapid-fire quip, every glint of eye contact carried not just professional polish but echoes of personal wounds. In that revelation, their art gains new resonance. We see not just two entertainers playing roles, but two flawed, vulnerable men striving to create joy for others, even as they struggled to forgive each other and themselves. What can we learn from their intertwined journeys? First, that true partnership demands more than shared talent. It requires emotional honesty, respect for boundaries, and the courage to confront betrayal. Crosby's initial silence and Hope's later confession teach us that unspoken hurts can fester until they poison the bond we share with colleagues, friends, or loved ones. Yet their final unreleased recording reminds us that forgiveness is possible even after years of distance, if we find the humility to speak our truths and the grace to listen. In those private moments of confession backstage, when Crosby admitted he'd held on to anger longer than he held on to songs, and Hope acknowledged he hid behind jokes when he should have reached out, we witnessed the healing power of vulnerability and empathy. Their story shows that reconciliation need not erase scars. Instead, it can transform pain into compassion and deepen the connections that fuel creativity. Second, their experience underscores that creative synergy often arises from contrast. Musical precision meeting spontaneous wit, measured rehearsal meeting improvisational flair. Yet without trust and mutual support, that contrast can become conflict. Today's teams, whether in film, theater, music, or the corporate world, can take heart from Crosby and Hope's example. When we honor each other's strengths without diminishing differences, we unlock possibilities richer than any individual effort. But when we allow jealousy, betrayal, or pride to fester, even the most gifted collaborations can falter. The Crosby-Hope legacy reminds us to cultivate psychological safety, to encourage honest feedback, to value each contributor's nonverbal cues, and to approach tensions as opportunities for growth rather than threats to egos. Finally, their journey invites us to view art, not as mere entertainment, but as a mirror reflecting the complexity of humanity. When we watch Bing's warm baritone waver with hidden sorrow, or Bob's grin flicker with unspoken regret, we engage with art that resonates because it is rooted in real emotion. Their rivalry and later reconciliation infuse their performances with authenticity, teaching us that the most enduring art emerges when creators channel both triumph and pain into their work. In an era where social media can gloss over imperfections, the Crosby-Hope story stands as a powerful counterpoint. Behind every flawless facade there may lie a story of struggle, loss, and eventual healing. As you carry these lessons forward, consider your own collaborations. Are there old betrayals or unspoken tensions waiting to be addressed? Can you muster the humility to reach out, to apologize, or to forgive? True partnerships thrive on compassion and accountability. When we dare to show vulnerability, we invite others to do the same, and together we build creative legacies that endure. Thank you for joining this deep dive into the hidden rivalry of two entertainment titans. If you found their story as illuminating as it is moving, please share it with someone who values the human side of art. And if you're eager for more revelations about legendary collaborations, both harmonious and fraught, subscribe, like, and ring the bell, so you'll be first to uncover the next untold chapter in Hollywood history. Because ultimately, the greatest performance we can give each other is genuine respect and the courage to turn personal pain into collective inspiration.